Welcome to the Oh Hell No podcast, where Nicole delivers a daily dose of inspiration by discussing passion, purpose, and struggle with people who are living their best life doing what they love. Here's Nicole.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Oh Hell No podcast. Today I have Jude Charles. He is a story-driven filmmaker, brand strategist, and speaker. Welcome, Jude. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Nicole.
Yes. So, 13 years of producing documentaries and videos for purpose-driven entrepreneurs. I love this. When did you realize you had the ability to tell stories through film?
So I have been telling stories really all of my life. As an 8-year-old kid, I wasn't the kid that was like outside playing basketball or football. I wasn't the kid even inside playing video games. Instead, I was writing books. So I was writing 100-page books, and they were stories about what I thought my future life would look like. And so as I turned a teenager and, getting into high school, I realized that I could take these stories that I was writing and actually turn them into videos or turn them into films. And that's really when it kind of started for me. It was around the age of 16 that I was in a TV production classroom. And there was a teacher, the teacher of that classroom, who, saw something in me. She saw some kind of talent in me. And she decided to teach me everything that she knew about film and video. And so at the end of that year, that school year, junior year of high school, she looked at me, she was like, Jude, you're really, really talented at this. I think you should start a business. And I had no idea what it meant to start a business, to be an entrepreneur. I had no entrepreneurs in my family, and I come from a big family. And so she didn't allow me to say yes or no. By the following day, she bought my first set of business cards and really gave me the big jump that I needed to go out and really do this full time.
Oh my gosh, what a divine intervention.
Yeah, it really was amazing. It really was. And I really wouldn't be here, doing the work that I'm doing today. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that teacher, Mrs. Donnelly.
Wow, that is amazing. I love that story. So what do you think is unique about the way that you tell stories?
I think what makes it unique for me is, so I tell stories for entrepreneurs, and the first thing that, people probably think of is, okay, you're just creating marketing videos for the entrepreneur that talks about what they do and the product or service that they're providing. Really, what I look to find out is, who is this entrepreneur? How did they get to this point that they're successful in their career, or that they decided to create this product or service? Kind of the same thing that you're doing with this podcast. Like, you're asking me questions, how did I get here? Mm-hmm. That is what makes me unique, is that I'm really digging deep to find out what makes you you. Like, I get that you do this, for example, I had a client that was running a cosmetic business. There's a lot of other cosmetic businesses out there. What makes you different? What makes you feel like, I have to do this, that I'm qualified to do this? When I work with entrepreneurs, that is what I'm looking for. What makes you you? What makes you different? So that other people will now be connected to that, and it won't even matter what you sell. They're connected to who you are as a person.
Nice. So you have worked for some big names. You've worked with Steve Harvey, Coldwell Banker, Google. So what was the hardest part of starting a business like this? And if you remember, who was your first client?
Ooh, first client, I do not remember. So when I first started, I was doing small gigs. So I was doing birthday parties, small weddings, church events, retirement parties. So those first couple of years, I really don't remember the clients as much. And the other reason I don't remember, because those first 5 years of business for me were very hard. They were brutal, because I struggled to make money in those first 5 years. I struggled to really figure out, okay, how do I want to do this, and do it in a way that I can market and promote myself. I was helping other people market and promote themselves, but I didn't know how to do it for myself. And so those first 5 years were just the hardest, of figuring out, okay, how do I charge the right prices? How do I find the right clients that are willing to pay me what I'm worth? It wasn't until 2010, I was working with a woman by the name of Keyshia Dior. She was opening and starting a cosmetic company called KR Cosmetics. And I had been working with her for a year, but for me, I was still struggling. She was a great paying client. She was like one of the first clients that was willing to pay my rate and willing to actually invest in herself, because she was willing to. She came to me originally wanting to do like a vlog video series, and I just wasn't into that at all. And so I pitched her a different idea. I said, what if we created a documentary and showed people how you were building this company behind the scenes, like what you were really doing to create the products? What were you really doing? Like, what is the vision behind this? And so she was one of the first ones that was really willing to do that. And, after the first year, although I was working with her and it was great, it wasn't enough to just have that one client that was great. And so I remember there was this day specifically where I was sitting on the edge of my bed and I was just thinking to myself, like, okay, this has been cool. This has been fun, but you really got to make a decision here, Jude. Like, are you going to continue this and kind of continue to slug along? Or is it time to just say, look, I've done this for a good 5 years and it's time to just say I had a good run and, let's just call it quits from here. And I remember in that moment, I had been sitting there for at least 45 minutes, sitting on the edge of my bed, just thinking about this. What am I going to do? And I remember getting a phone call, and the phone call was Keyshia. And I look at the phone and I'm like, I may not want to take this phone call right now because I'm not in the right headspace. I have a client calling me and I'm not in the right headspace. But for one reason or another, I decided to take the call. And as soon as I pick up, I'm like, hello. And she's like, Jude, you won't believe it. Like, you won't believe it. And there's just so much excitement in her voice. And I'm like, Keyshia, what happened? And she's like, I just got off the phone with my accountant. And, he just told me that after doing this for 12 months, like, I finally broke the $1 million mark. Like, we've made $1 million in gross revenue. And I remember pulling the phone away from my ear, like, this is not real life right now. Here I am struggling to make, $30,000 a year at that point, the first 5 years. And I have a client who's only been in business for the first year making $1 million. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was the turning point. That was like, okay, I've got to figure something out, because obviously the problem isn't what I'm doing. The problem is me, that I needed to get out of my shell and really ask for help. I needed to ask myself a different question. And that question really was for me, and it wasn't about the number, but the question was really like, what would it look like for me to make $1 million? Right? Like, how can I make that possible? Because ultimately working with Keyshia, what I realized is I had the blueprint. Like, I saw what she was doing every day for a whole year. I saw what she was doing. And that was for me, like, the biggest challenge, is trying to get over that hurdle of, okay, how do I really do this thing that I fell in love with? Right? I was grateful enough to have a teacher push me into doing this, but how do I now make this work so that I can continue to do this and continue to live a fulfilled life?
Thank you so much for being so candid about that, because I think sometimes I have people on the show and I ask them to share their struggles, because I really want to give people a well-rounded, experience on what it's like to be an entrepreneur, follow your passions, and how things can be up and down. And a lot of times people, they don't really share their struggles. And what you're saying is real, because it happens to most entrepreneurs, So I just wanted to say that first. Thank you for that. And then I want to say, so after you asked yourself that question and you were thinking about, okay, what am I going to do? Like, how long did it take you from that point to actually see some results that you were happy with?
So as soon as I started asking myself that question, like, what would it look like to do this? I immediately started signing up for like online courses. I was going to workshops, filmmaking workshops, but filmmaking workshops that were specifically geared towards business, because that's really mostly what I needed to learn. I knew the talent. I knew how to create great looking documentaries and great videos, but I needed to understand the business behind it. And so I really just dove into that. I dove into going to marketing conferences. I dove into going to workshops. I was taking a lot of online courses. And it took some time. It took, I think, the first year of doing this, 'cause actually I took a year off. Like I was still working with Keyshia because I worked with Keyshia for 3 years, but I had decided that, okay, I knew what the answer was, and now I had to really be obsessed about mastering that part of the business. And so I took a year off. And so the second year, when I actually went back and was starting to apply a lot of what I learned, I remember that I still didn't have the confidence. Like specifically, I had this client come to me, and before he ever became a client, he was an interior designer. He came to me and he approached me. He found me through another project I had done like 4 years before that. And he had remembered me, and he came to me knowing that he wanted to do this project. He had seen some of the work I did with Keyshia. There was another project I had done in between that with a watch repairman that was like a short documentary. And he knew he wanted to work with me. And after we had the first meeting, I took forever to work on the pitch just because I knew I wanted to ask for more money than I had ever asked for at the time. But I wasn't confident enough to ask for the money. And that was something I needed to learn that they don't teach you in workshops, or they don't teach you in these conferences, is to have the confidence to say, this is what I'm worth. And so that for me, that was kind of like the moment that I realized, okay, this could work, because I walked in and I was doing the pitch, telling him what the project would be, giving him the proposal. And I remember it got to the last part and asking for the money. And at the time, this was the most money I had ever asked for. It was $15,000. And, I got to that point and I was just like, I'm going to do this, like mentally talking to myself in my head. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I have to do this. All this work that I've done leading up to this point, I have to. Like, if he says no, then okay, he says no. Because they do tell you that, like, you're going to get no's. And so I asked, I said, this project is going to cost $15,000. And I'm thinking in my head, okay, he's going to come back to me and say, okay, how can we, that's a little bit too much than what I was thinking. And instead he said to me, all right, great. When do we start? And I was mind blown. Like, I had never, up until that point, I had never had a client just automatically say, all right, when do we start? Like, I had to negotiate. I always had to negotiate. Even Keyshia, who paid me the rate that I wanted to be paying, I had to negotiate with her. But this was the first client that was just like, all right, when do we start? And I realized at that point, it was all the work that I had been doing that led to it. Like, I had the confidence. I just needed to exude that confidence. I just needed to show up and really be confident in what I was asking for and what I was saying.
Yeah, that's really hard too, to be like that. I interviewed someone yesterday, and they said one of the things that they dislike the most about what they do is having to explain why they charge what they charge for what they do. So when it comes to money, it's always like a funky two-step.
Yeah, it is. It is. Luckily, it's gotten easier over the years. I had to. That's something else. Like, I had to learn that you do have to explain it, because as entrepreneurs, we're coming into this with so much experience. We're coming into it with what's called the curse of knowledge, right? We know so much, but the person on the other end, they just don't know enough about what we do. And this is money that they have to exchange, right? Like, this is something that is valuable to them that they have to now put. And it's not even so much about the money. It's about the trust. They have to put their trust in you and to say, all right, I'm going to give you this money, but I'm giving you my trust. And, there's an old saying that, trust is, it's easy to gain trust. It's hard to gain trust. But then the one moment that you lose that trust, you can never gain it back again. And that's really the biggest thing that we do have to explain it, right? We do have to go through those hurdles, because that's the cost of doing business. I didn't know that, because I used to be the same way. I used to be the same way where I didn't want to explain it. Like, my work should speak for itself. It doesn't. Right. In real life, it doesn't, right? And so it is a challenge. And it's a challenge I think every entrepreneur still goes through, because when you get to that next level, you still have to explain, okay, why are you taking that next level? Why are you taking that next step? So that people will appreciate and respect what the amount of experience, the amount of time that you put in for what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to ask you, what do you spend the most money on for your business? Like, just, is it equipment? Is it, training? What do you put the most money into?
It's a little bit of both. I definitely spend quite a lot of money into training. I think after going through that experience years ago of realizing that I needed the training, like I needed the help, I continue to do training. Like I go to at least 5 or 6 marketing workshops a year that I have to travel to. And so definitely a lot of training, a lot of, I have a business coach. And so it's a lot of coaching, a lot of training. And then, yeah, because of the industry that I'm in, equipment is expensive. And equipment in our industry has rapidly changed in the last 6-7 years, meaning that there's a lot of new equipment coming out. Obviously with cell phones now, cell phones have cameras on them, but beyond that, it's even just the equipment itself. There's now 4K, and I won't get into the technical parts of it, but definitely I spend quite a lot of money on equipment and on training, and realistically, I probably spend more money on training because it's not about the talent. It's not about so much because I can create the most engaging film, but being able to operate a business and being able to help my clients market that film, right? Because they want to return on their investment, the money that they're spending. That's where I spend a lot of money, is staying on top of not so much the latest techniques and tactics, but sharpening my marketing tools, so that marketing and branding, so that I can continue to help my clients.
Yeah, staying ahead of that curve because it's fast.
Right, yeah.
So, what is the biggest mistake that you have made to date as an entrepreneur, and what have you learned from it?
That's a great question. I think the biggest mistake I made was not asking for help sooner. I mentioned earlier that I come from a big family, so I'm the last of 10 children, and I am the only entrepreneur, still to this day, the only entrepreneur in my family. But I didn't realize that I needed to ask for help, like mentorship and coaching, or even just looking at other people in the industry and going to them and asking questions. I think that was the biggest mistake that I made, because I struggled for those 5 years when I didn't have to. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that I didn't have to struggle. Because there's some people that's dealt a bad hand, right? Like we get dealt bad cards and we have to figure it out. Born in the wrong environment, born to the wrong parents. Like there's a lot of different things. I didn't necessarily have that. And so that's the struggle that I didn't need to go through. And I didn't understand having goals and being able to play the game that I want to play in business, that you can set the vision for what you want. And had I done those things, I would have been able to grow a lot faster. But I think that was like something that I had to overcome, is realizing, okay, I needed help and not having too much pride to ask for help.
Yep. So why do you think most businesses have so much trouble with marketing, aside from the fact that it's so expensive?
That is a great question. Why do businesses have problems with marketing? Because there is so much to do in marketing, and it gets complicated. Not everything that we're told to do is right for the business, right for that person. The perfect example is that the way I've built my business over the years is I don't do traditional marketing. I've been blessed that since that 5-year mark, every client that I've ever gotten was through word of mouth. And so things like social media for me would not necessarily work because of things like how much I charge and the hurdle of how much time it would take for a person to trust me. There's different things that I do, like going to the marketing conferences is definitely strategic because I can find clients there who are already thinking and investing in themselves. But I think there's so much out there to do that people get overwhelmed with what to do. And then they don't stick with anything long enough to figure out, okay, this can work, right? Like they go from tactic to tactic to tactic because there's so much to do and you're just trying to figure out what's the secret ingredient. And there isn't any secret ingredient. You just got to stick with it long enough for it to work. Like I can choose to stick with social media and get it to work. Now I know it'll take me a little bit longer, but it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It wouldn't work for where I'm looking to go. It wouldn't work for the game that I'm looking to play. And I think that's why entrepreneurs get so caught up with marketing. It is expensive. It does take time on any platform. There's different time constraints, right? But it's just the fact that there's so much to do and so little time, right? Because a lot of entrepreneurs play the short game. They want to make money right now versus playing that long-term game. And it's hard to play that long-term game. It's not easy when you have bills and you probably have children to take care of. But it's knowing what to do and when to do it type of thing. And it's tricky. It is tricky.
Yeah, it definitely is. Do you feel that social media and the ability that people have to control their content has in any way hindered your business? Because everybody thinks they're a filmmaker now with this damn Instagram. I mean, you know. So how does...
No, I don't think it does. I think, what I focus a lot on is the storytelling part of it. I often say to my clients that, look, at the end of the day, there's more than enough people that hold cameras in their hands and call themselves video producers, videographers, filmmakers. Not everyone knows how to tell a story, though. And even if I choose to tell a story with my camera phone, like there's a way to film that. There's a way to tell that story, the way to edit it so that when someone watches it, they're inspired by it. Or when someone watches it, they're now making a decision to say that I want to buy whatever that person has, or I want to be a part of whatever mission that person's a part of. So no, I think in many ways it's helped because social media has opened up the door for entrepreneurs to get access to their audience in a way that they couldn't do it before, right? Like they had to, if I were to do a documentary on an entrepreneur now, they would have to try to find a network that would pick it up. Not right now, but back in the day, if I were doing a documentary on an entrepreneur back in the day, they would have to find a network to pick it up and decide to air it. And they would have to depend on that. Now with Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, like there's so many opportunities, and not to mention the Netflix, Hulus, and so many others of the world. Like there's so many opportunities to now find ways to distribute that content. So in many ways, it's helped me because it becomes easier for me to tell the client, like, you already have the platform, you already have the audience, but you don't have the right story that you're telling that audience. You're not connecting with them in the right way so that they really understand who you are. Like you're just posting, theoretically, you're posting buy now, buy now, buy now, when really you should be posting, this is what I believe in, this is what I stand for, and this is who I am. Like this is how I was raised, and this is like what I really, really believe in and why I'm doing this business. So in many ways, this made it a lot easier for me to say, hey, you have the platform. What are you going to do with that platform now? How do we leverage it?
So in your opinion, what is the best platform for someone who has a business but doesn't have any marketing budget for their business?
It depends. It depends on how you're building your audience. I think there's two that really stick out to me. There's Facebook and there's LinkedIn. Facebook works just because it's such a large platform and you're able to put long form videos if you need to. You're able to do live and so many other things. But LinkedIn works if you're looking to reach out to other people that are professionals, right? It's knowing who your audience is that you're trying to reach. So LinkedIn would be perfect if, for example, I have a client who is an event designer and she's looking to reach a certain audience that is making over $100,000. Professionals are on LinkedIn and they're connecting with other professionals on LinkedIn. And so she has a greater likelihood to connect with someone on LinkedIn than on Facebook, because on Facebook we may be scrolling and we're looking at family pictures or we're doing other things, but on LinkedIn it's a more professional network. So I think it depends on the audience that you're trying to reach and how you're looking to build it. When I worked on Keyshia Dior's documentary in 2010, for her the platform was Twitter and YouTube. That's all she used. YouTube to actually upload the video, but then Twitter every single day she was interacting with her audience. Every single day she was either tweeting or retweeting her audience, telling them what she's working on, still showing them behind the scenes, even though the documentary would be coming out later. It really depends on what platform you're building it on. We've seen people win on Twitter. We've seen them win on Facebook. We're even seeing people now win on Instagram, doing the Instagram stories every single day and getting really creative with that. I think, again, it goes back to what I said about marketing and how, like, all of it can work. It's just what do you decide to put your time and effort into so that you make it work.
Yeah, it's a lot of time and effort that you put into that stuff. It's just like, even with me and my podcast, it's just like, oh my God, like I'm just not the person to be like, on my camera all day, like talking, but I know that you have to kind of do that to engage with, your listeners and people who are tuning into the podcast. And then whenever I do a video, I feel like, oh my God, I look so dumb. Like, this is so stupid. Like, I just beat myself up. I can't take it. Then I went and started a lash business, and that's been just the hardest thing.
I think, so believe it or not, some of the same things that you're going through, like with thinking, with just looking at, okay, you may not like the way you look. My clients go through the same thing. And what I tell them is, to be honest, you're the only person that's worried about it.
Yeah.
The other person looking at it, the other person like engaging with it, the thing that you think they'll be most worried about, they're not worried about, right? Like, we want to look perfect, and I get that, but people don't. They would just want to connect with you, and as long as you're saying something and talking about something that they care about, that's it. Like, you could be having a bad hair day, and they may not even notice that. They're engaging with the thing that you're saying. Now, I'm not telling you to go on there and have a bad hair day and just say, I'm going to record, but they're looking to engage with whatever it is that you have to sell. Like, with lashes specifically, right? Like, I'm sure the easiest thing to do is to post pictures of before and after, what the person looked like before and then what they look like after. But the other thing to go in and do is educate the person on what's the perfect lash for their face. I know nothing about lashes, so I'm just giving you like off the cuff information. But like, some people don't wear the right lashes for their face. They look crazy. And so showing that, talking about that, that's what the person will really care about, because then they'll value like, oh man, like, of course I want to buy lashes from her because she's the expert now, right? It's often this thing that I call the dramatic demonstration of proof. Right. And there's 6 different ones, but one of them is called live illustration. And that's a little bit of what I just talked about, is educating your audience on the right lashes to buy. And I don't know what else there could be, but just educating them on what they need to know, that you've seen people out there looking crazy with lashes, or why even wear lashes? What do lashes do for your face? There's so much to teach them. And that is what you really should be getting on talking about. It's educating them. If there's a story behind why you even got in the lash business on top of doing the podcast, and how that may even relate to each other, there's that. Because even like taking the same idea that I talked about with Keyshia building a cosmetic company, the behind the scenes of you building this company and how hard it is, just getting on there and saying, you know what, marketing is hard. Like, it's hard to do this marketing every single day, and just being real about it, because there's other people that you are inspiring through the work that you're doing. There's other people that you're inspiring through this podcast, being able to hear so many different stories. What are you taking away from it? Doing a recap video on Instagram to say, this is what I took from it, and this is what I'm taking from doing this entire experience. Like, there's so many ideas that you could do that will help you.
You are saying all of the things that I have been going back and forth with in my head and just haven't done the work. Like, I was just saying to myself the other day, oh my God, there's so many girls with these lashes. They look crazy. I need to write a blog about it. And I swear to you, I started writing the blog, and then I just got distracted, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, but just not right now. And then I'm like, okay, that's something I need to do, is start doing blogs about different things that, revolve around lashes. Then with the podcast, I'm like, oh, I really should do like a recap and then go through things that I've learned from these guests. And it's just stuff that I've been like toying with in my head, but I just haven't been putting it into action. So it's kind of like you are affirming these things for me, like saying, yes, honey, get off your butt and get it done. It's so insane. Wow. Thanks, Jude.
No, you should definitely do it. Like, I think that's the one thing that holds all of us up, every entrepreneur, is there's just so much that we think about, but you got to just do it. Just hit send, hit publish, right? And because ultimately, like, if you just keep switching, then you don't get anything done.
Right.
And so you definitely should just do it, because it's what is going to get you to that next level. Like, me even saying it's ideas, but execution is what matters most.
No, absolutely. So what are customers the most concerned about when they hire you? Like, what do you find to be like a common thread, if there's anything?
I mentioned earlier the common thread of how they look, but I think the other big thing is always how do they actually get the result, the goal that they want to get, right? So, for example, some clients may come to me because they're looking to attract the right type of audience, the right type of client to work with them. How do they make sure to do that? Because it's not just about, okay, let's create this cool video, let's create this great documentary and upload it and that's it. You got to put work behind it. You actually have to use it and leverage it. Keyshia is one great example of how she, like, I looked recently in 2000 up until 2017, she was still promoting the documentary that we did back in 2013, right? And so I think what they think about most is how do I leverage this so it's not just I spent money and we said we did this project, but how do I make sure that in some way I'm getting the result that I want, whether it's attracting the right type of client, whether it's leaving behind a legacy. I'm working on a project right now with a woman named Tracy Lynn, who we're doing a 6-part documentary series, and she's been in business for over 20 years, running a multi-million-dollar enterprise, direct selling business, where she's selling jewelry, and she has 35,000 consultants. But really, the story is about her. It's about who she is. And one of the questions I asked her towards the end of the documentary is, what does legacy mean to you? And for her, legacy means everything that she's been doing in this documentary is to be able to tell her story and show other entrepreneurs, other people that want to be entrepreneurs, what it takes to do it, what it takes to succeed, because it's not easy. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made. And so I think that's what they struggle with the most is, how do I leverage this? How do I make this make sense so that it's not an ego project? It's not a vanity project. It's more of, I want to inspire others, or I want to make sure that the right people are attracted to me.
Have you ever dealt with an unpleasant customer? And if you have, what is your technique for mitigating those types of situations?
I have dealt with unhappy customers. I think it's really understanding what I try not to get into my own feelings about it. I always try to understand, like, okay, what is this person really upset about? Because they'll say one thing, and usually they'll say something to not hurt your feelings. But what I always say to a client is, just be real with me. What is it that's really happening here? What are you really unhappy about? And I try to, if I can, fix that problem. If it means, I've done it before where I've lost money on trying to fix a problem for a client. And it was worth it. It was worth every penny of it, because then you keep that client long term. Because I talked about trust earlier. That's a part of trust, is being able to partner with the client, being able to collaborate with them and really partner with them and say, look, if it really is something that I messed up on, right? Or it's something that I feel like can be fixed and it's really not that big of a problem, then I'm gonna own it. Now, there's definitely some crazy clients out there, and you just gotta let them know, hey, like this just isn't the right fit, and it's time for us to walk away. But I'd say most of the time for me, I've always tried to figure out, okay, what's the real problem here? Let's take time to talk this through, and then solve that problem. Because I think by nature I'm a problem solver. I think every entrepreneur is really. That's why we go into business, is because we want to solve a problem. So I try to solve it as long as it's in my. Yeah, if I can actually solve that problem.
Right. So is there anything that you want to do that you haven't done because you're a little afraid of, doing it?
Ooh, that's a great question. Anything I've wanted to do but afraid to do. That's a challenging question for me, because I actually push myself to go beyond what I'm afraid of. So, for example, recently, last year, in November, I turned 30. And my girlfriend she said to me, she was trying to surprise me. She said to me, hey, I'm going to take you somewhere for your birthday, but I'm not going to tell you where I'm taking you. And I was like, okay, but how do I dress for it? Like, what am I supposed to wear? And she's like, be comfortable. We're going to be outside. So wear shorts, wear a t-shirt. We're going to be outside, but I'm still not going to tell you where we're going. Now, the crazy part is I had to drive to where we were going. Like, we were both in the car together. So I'm like trying to figure out, okay, where are we going? Like, I'm thinking the whole way there, where are we going? But long story short, we end up at a skydiving center.
Ooh.
Now, I had been talking about skydiving for 3 years, and there's a reason I've been talking about it and I haven't
Right.
done it yet, right? um, so I realized, like, okay, I'm going skydiving today. And, you walk in. At first, I was excited because I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm here. There's no way I'm walking back and saying I'm not going to do this today. But then you walk up and they hand you 5 pages of paperwork. And it's like you go through all the 5 pages and it reminds you over and over these 3 words: you might die.
Oh my.
Over and over. And you have to sign the paperwork to say that even though you know you might die, you're not going to sue us. Right? So you're signing your life away. And then we walk into another room and they have us watch a video, and the video reminds you might die.
Oh.
But ultimately I ended up doing it. I mean, I was out of my mind, like, what in the world am I doing? But it was the greatest experience that I've ever had. I share that story because I often am trying to push myself beyond my own boundaries, beyond what I think that I can do. Like, I'm doing podcasting, which is something that years ago I would have said, no, I'm not going to be doing public speaking. I'm not going to get in front of a mic and talk to people. But I've been doing that a lot this year. I've been speaking on stages a lot this year. It's frightening. It is frightening and it's scary. The nerves never go away, but I realize each time after I do it that it's a great experience and there's nothing to really be afraid of. So I don't know that I have anything on my list right now that I can say, okay, this is one thing that I know I want to do and I'm afraid to do it. But I think when it does come up, I just go for it. And I'm like, I have to do it, like, because that's the only way to continue to grow. That's the only way to continue to get to that next level, is just going for it.
That's awesome. And you have a great voice, by the way. So, I mean, speaking, please, you got that in the bag.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So, do you feel like this is your purpose work? And if you do feel like it is, what specifically do you feel about it is a part of your purpose work?
Yeah, I do feel like it's my purpose work. I mentioned that I'd been writing stories since 8 years old, and I never really understood why. I never understood why was I this kid locked up in the house, like, writing. I realized that my passion is in storytelling, whether it's sitting here on a podcast, whether it is with a camera in my hand or writing. My passion, my purpose is in telling stories, and not just telling stories for the sake of telling stories, but being able to tell stories to inspire others, to be able to show others what is possible. For me, that has kind of always been my story. Like, the teacher pushing me to be an entrepreneur is showing me what was possible. Like, I didn't know that was possible. I didn't know at 17 I could actually start a business. Seeing what Keyshia was able to do in her business, that showed me what was possible. And now seeing what Tracy Lynn and Steve Harvey and other people have been doing in their businesses shows me what's possible, what's really possible when you decide to put your mind to it. But it's those stories that really open your mind to it. Another thing that I started doing after those 5 years of struggling is I started reading a lot. And that helped expand my mind into what was possible. So I think overall, this is my purpose because I get to create these documentaries. I get to create these stories. I get to create these videos of entrepreneurs and what they're doing in order to show it to the world and to be able to inspire other entrepreneurs to do the impossible, to do what is in their mind impossible. And that is my purpose, is to lead others to what's possible, to lead others to understanding that there's a way to do it. You just have to figure out what's the way you want to do it, right? Because we all have a choice. We all have a choice as to the game in life that we want to play. But how do you decide to do that? How do you have the right perspective and the right vision to say, this is what I want to do? And I think it's being able to see what's possible. There's an old story about this guy that ran the very first time he ran a 4-minute mile. He ran a mile in 4 minutes. He was the very first guy to do it, and I believe it was in the 60s. In the year that he did it, 4 other people decided to do it because they realized what was possible. The year after that, I think another 60. So for me, that is, it's not easy creating these documentaries, but it is worth it at the end of the day when I get to sit back and look at it and realize this is going to change someone's life. They're going to see this, they're going to be inspired by it, and they're going to realize I can do this too.
Yeah, it's amazing. Documentaries, just videos. I was watching the Kardashians one day, and they were doing this video with their mom where they just had her sit. Well, actually, it wasn't them. It was, someone else. But he was like, "Oh, I didn't know all of these things about you. It would be so great to get it on video for like." The grandkids and I thought that was such an amazing idea to sit your parents down and kind of learn about their lives, because honestly, what do we really know about our parents' lives except the little tidbits that we get growing up, we might get a little story here, a little story there, but like we don't really know like what our parents went through or did as kids, the full story,
Right. Yeah.
So I thought that was so amazing. So I love the whole concept of just, capturing, people telling stories on film and things like that. I think it's amazing. Yeah. So I love what you do. So this is the Oh Hell No podcast. And on this podcast, I always ask people to share an oh hell no moment that has come up along the way, because we're all on this journey and we have these moments. And these moments, I feel like we're supposed to learn and grow from them. So I try to have people share a moment where they learned something or it changed their perspective on something. And it could be a professional moment, a personal moment. It could be a positive moment, a negative moment, just a moment that you were like, oh, hell no. Like, hold on.
I feel like I already gave that away, unfortunately. So I think the skydiving for me at the time was something it was the craziest thing I've ever done. I'm an adrenaline junkie, right? I'm a thrill seeker, but I had never jumped out of an airplane 10,000 feet in the air. And so I feel like in many ways I've kind of given away the oh hell no moment. But I think what I learned though, I was afraid, really afraid to jump out of that plane. And there's a video of it online. And when you see my face like jumping out of the airplane, the moment that I jump out of the airplane, like you can tell like, okay, he looks like he's already dead. But I tell you, when my feet hit the ground, it was one of the most exhilarating moments of my life, to the point that I was now thinking to myself, okay, how can I do this again? And so I think, Steve Harvey has this video that's been popular. He talks about jump, right? Like you just got to jump. And it's really all about entrepreneurship, but he's talking about jumping into entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. I relate that to skydiving. Sometimes you just need to jump even when you don't know. One of the things on the paper, when I have to sign the paper, it says the parachute may not come out. So even when you don't know the parachute's going to come out, if it's going to come out or not, you just have to jump. And I learned that day for me that even though I was scared, and that was my like, oh, hell no moment, like this is really happening. I didn't even get time to mentally prepare for this. Sometimes you don't need the time to mentally prepare. You just got to do it. And when you do it and you realize everything's okay, you're still alive, right? Like you didn't lose a limb. You didn't crash and splat on the floor. Like, you realize it's okay and you can continue to see another day and continue to move forward. So I think that is a big lesson that I took away from that is I landed on 2 feet. And because of it, it now gives me the courage and now gives me the confidence to continue to do more greater things.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you again for coming on. Can you please tell us how we can get connected with you, your email, websites, whatever you have, and where can we watch this Keyshia Kayor video? Because I'm interested.
So it's really simple. Everything where you can connect with me and learn more about me and the work that I'm doing with my clients. And even if, let's say you have a story to tell and you realize like, it's time to actually document my story. It's time to really show the world what I'm doing, the work that I'm doing. If you feel like it's your time, it's your moment, you can connect with me on my website. My website is judecharles.co. So my first and last name .co. And you can watch the Keyshia Dior documentary is on there. I think it's only part 3 that's on there. We did a 3-part documentary series. But I can send you the direct link to watch all 3.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Yeah, I could do that. But yeah, there's some other client work on there as well that that you can see and be inspired by. The Tracy Lynn documentary comes out at the end of this month, and that's another inspiring one. So yeah.
Awesome. Are you looking to do work with like Netflix or anybody like that in your future? Do you feel like that's something you'd like to do, or have you even thought about that?
I love that you asked that question because there is so recently I was able to interview Les Brown for another documentary that I was working on. And he is a person that I'd like to do his life story. His story has never been documented. He's a guy that's been in motivational speaking for over 40 years. He's traveled the world, and his story has never been documented. And I think that is one that not only I'd love to tell his story just because of the nature of who he is, but also being able to bring that to like a Netflix or a Hulu. Yeah, for sure. Even if it's not Les Brown, though, for sure, I think next level for me is definitely working on a documentary, bringing a story to life of entrepreneurs. I don't know if you've ever watched Chef's Table on Netflix, but it's similar to the kind of work that I'm doing already right now. It's all about chefs and their stories and how they were able to get to the level of where they are now. That is what I'd love to do with all kinds of different entrepreneurs. So I'd love that you asked that question because that's kind of like my vision of what's next for me. It's continuing to still tell these stories for entrepreneurs and continue to work with the great clients that I work with, but also now having that partnership with a Netflix-like platform.
Yeah, well, we just spoke it into existence today, so it's going to happen.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe and rate the show.